Welcome, Faiza. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Tina.
joining for Priceless Advice and very many congratulations. So well deserved. Much celebration in the sector. Having you as Executive Director of the Council for Certification and Volunteer
Ah,
Administration.
yay! Thank
There's a
you. It
there's a
is.
party.
You know what? It's been like a month and a bit since I took on the role, and it's so exciting. Like I get to see all the applications that come in from the different potential candidates, and I've been doing this work for 20 years, and it's opening my eyes as to all the different places volunteer engagement professionals and just volunteer engagement folks who do this in their volunteer life, just where they are doing this work and where volunteers appear everywhere. So it has been like, it's just been such a privilege to be able to do that and to be in this role. And I'm very excited for all the candidates that are going to be writing their exam in the first couple of weeks of October.
Yeah, and I loved your idea we had on email kind of setting up this appointment that, get me in touch with some of the new CVAs whose
Ah,
essays were really spectacular and who you think are interesting and exciting. I love to, I keep reaching out to people who are peers who don't yet have a blog or have their own video channel or aren't yet known for speaking, but that I'm noticing at least through LinkedIn or friends of friends or who are getting referred to me, and those are exactly the voices that I we want to amplify
yeah,
now
yeah.
more than ever, just to get the real picture of who's out there in these times, particularly doing this important work. What were some of the, I know there were like four or five themes that the essays were asked to do, and without divulging any author secrets,
Yeah.
what were some of the wonderful ideas or essay themes that really inspired you after 20 years of doing this?
So the essays they come in from the folks who are doing their renewal. So what I like about the essays are that people definitely have a minimum of 8 years experience, because you need 3 to certify, and then once you certify, you have had your certification for 5 years. So listening like, and I mean by reading the essays, um, there was somebody who wrote an essay about like a big mistake that they had made
Mm.
and what they learned from it. And I loved that because they really took stock of like what their skills were and what they were really good at, and then they thought about how could they improve on the situation down the road. So I loved the humility of that essay. I loved the reflection that that person demonstrated, and then how they were really thinking about their own skills, and they related them back to the competency framework for the CVA, the Certification in Volunteer Administration. I love that essay. I loved your essay about, and so Dana's essay.
I wasn't fishing for that compliment, but feel free to keep going.
Yes, yes. Well, I loved it because it was truly reflective of you. So Dana's essay was entitled "You Are Not Alone," and I mean that's just really what your YouTube series is about, right? Is about connecting people, but also amplifying voices. And I love, anyways, I love the way you write and the way that you speak, because you make it so palatable, and it's not theory and it's not academic. It's just like listening to a friend who's really trying to give you advice and who cares about seeing you succeed. So let me turn my phone off because I just heard a beep there. Um,
Mom, what are you doing? What are you
well,
doing?
this is the COVID reality, right? Like we're
Yeah,
here in the exotic location of my king size bed. And where are
yeah.
you? Where are you? Are you in your
I'm in my work office is also my music room, so I have some music books and an old Phyllis Diller comedy album and my guitars in the back and like a stuffed dragon that makes a noise in the background. But
of it?
yeah, I've also just used my closet door in the upper bedroom as the background for these before. But yeah, and this is the reality of it, and everyone is very, very gracious and has a lot of empathy because we're all in very different boats in the same storm, but the
Yes.
storm the
Yeah.
storm is all hitting us, and um, And thank you for the mutual appreciation club we just had for a few minutes, because I enjoy your speaking and writing as well. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know when you sleep. I don't know how you manage, having a family and doing the tremendous work that you do, plus the work now as
Yeah.
executive director of CCVA. And, we're used, our profession, we're used to having a lot of hats and a lot on our plate, but you always inspire and amaze me with what you take on and still do all of it with such expert precision.
No, thank you for saying that, Dana. I think I do it all because I love doing it all. The thing that I recognize about this profession is that, we are mostly women in this profession.
Mhm.
And I've seen so many of my colleagues just to take a different path, right? After they've had kids, they've taken a different path. And for me, I'm just really being intentional about this is work that I'm passionate about. And, if I take care of the things I'm passionate about, it really helps me to be a better mom and to be a better partner to my husband, Irvin. Um, the other thing is that I really want my kids to see and to appreciate what it is like to have a mom who works
Mhm.
and a mom who can also be a great mom. And I know I can do both. Um, and honestly, I have so much support, and technology makes it really easy. So um, I have a wonderful husband at home that is really supportive. When I need, specific time and space away, I can get that. And I know that I'm so lucky, especially right now in COVID, in this time of, we're all working from home, from our beds, from our bathrooms, wherever we are, and being able to do this work. And it's so interesting because I think that your YouTube series came out at the perfect time, because if I was going into the office every day, the time I would be taking to commute and the open space that I have in my office, I don't think I would have the time to sit down and listen to as many podcasts as I am able to. And, watch the YouTube series that I want. Also watching Netflix at night, which
Yeah.
is also, increased. But it's like having your voice and having this ability to talk to you, but also to listen in on the conversations you've had with other people has come at the perfect time. So I'm so glad that I've, been able to watch some of them, not all of the episodes, but some of them, and then, ability to talk with you today as well. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. And half of the time that I'm doing these priceless advice interviews, or even asking people to send in their videos of little Tuesday tips if they don't have half an hour or whatever to sit down and have this conversation, it's
Yeah.
like you and I, or like, talking to Karina or talking to Nicole or talking to Rob, like it's conversations with friends. So
Yeah.
I recognize that it's helpful, and it's also has a little bit of a selfish but helpful selfish reason that I miss my friends and I miss seeing you in person. and
I
and
know. The
and
extrovert in me is thankful for the extrovert in you.
I know exactly. The extroverted me sees the extroverted you, and I thank our extroverts for acknowledging each other in these trying siloed times.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty major adaptation. And how what's fascinating in having these conversations, and what I want to kind of segue into for our next topic, is not only am I having conversations with people in different parts of the United States or North America, you're in Canada, but around the world. I talked to Tracy in Australia. I've got some other things set up with some other folks in other areas and countries. And again, that idea that the storm of a pandemic and the storm of economic crisis has affected everyone worldwide
Yeah.
in very different ways, not just because of individual response, but because of nonprofit local sector response, because of industry response, because of government response, and all the different governmental systems around the globe. And there's a pretty vast difference between how pandemic coping economically and personally seems to be going. And I have family in Vancouver, so I can speak to directly to my sister and her family that are
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Vancouver. Seems to be happening very differently just north of the border than it is. And again, preface this that I'm in San Francisco, I'm in California. doing relatively well. And California is the fifth largest economy in the world. So we're always kind of like our own country, no matter what else is going
Yeah.
on.
Your population is the entire population of Canada, so I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but what are some of the ways, so what are some of the good things that are coming out of how people are coping in, the province of Ontario where you
Yeah.
are? Like what are some wonderful things you're seeing as coping that maybe we can learn from down south?
Well,
Yeah.
two things that come to mind right away are that like technology has has really brought people out of their resistance to technology, right? Because there's no choice. And so I'm seeing a lot of people in our field. So at TAVA, which is the local AVA or Dovia, where
Hmm.
I am, have really stepped up, and AVAs across Ontario have really stepped up and are doing a lot of great training online. And so we see that connection that's still happening. And in some communities, um, and I'm thinking more of like the rural communities, of which we have many in Canada, they're seeing actually more attendance at their AVA workshops that are happening over Zoom versus the ones that happen in person, because there's no commute time, there's no treacherous weather to get through, right? You can just show up, and you don't have to get dressed. You can just, well, I mean, you should get dressed, but on the camera,
Yeah.
you don't
Only the
have.
top up, only waist up. That's all we need. I happen to be wearing jeans today, but that's rare. But go ahead. Yeah.
I'm wearing track pants, but a fabulous necklace. Um, so I am seeing that our sector is definitely more engaged. So our profession is definitely more engaged, and for me personally, there are multiple opportunities every week for me to engage with my colleagues, not only in Canada but even around the world. Like Dovia's in the U.S., in Australia, everyone is kind of opening up and not charging a fee, so you can attend and meet colleagues all around the world. Now the other thing that I'm seeing as a result of that is, like, I feel like our echo chambers are just echoing louder and louder, and I'm not seeing as many of us branch outside of our community to have our message and our voices amplified outside of the volunteer engagement profession. Um, but I think that the longer that this pandemic goes on, the more of that we'll see. So I was speaking to a colleague last week who was saying that she's been redeployed and she's doing different work, and so she's all of a sudden had to become this expert on email marketing, communications, and it's never something that would ever have been part of her job before. The staff who did take care of it were part-time and laid off, unfortunately, and because she's been redeployed, it's fallen to her. And so she's discovered these new networks in the communications and email marketing field, and is learning from them. And at the same time, a lot of them are learning from her about volunteerism and about the fact that that we do have this professional network worldwide of volunteer engagement professionals. So I think that I'm hoping that there'll be more of that, because we can talk to each other all we want. We
Hmm.
know how important our work is and how impactful our work is. But we really need to get the message out beyond just our own group and our own um, group of leaders of volunteers, right? So who else needs to hear our message, and how can we be intentional about making sure, how can we be intentional to make sure our message is far reaching?
Hmm.
So that's a little bit more difficult, because I think we're all kind of talking to the networks that we already know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's an effort in the states, and we organizing the National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement to be multi-sector, and is
Mhm.
right now really rolling out, really genuinely hitting, you know, wheels to the road, rubber to the road with our
Yeah.
working groups. The Engaging Funders group is spreading this conversation to funders and asking them, why doesn't volunteer engagement come up as a funding priority, and is getting really interesting answers, one of which is the executive directors and CEOs of nonprofits or government agencies don't ask for it, and if you
Yes.
don't ask for it, we don't know to give it to you, or we're less likely to. And so we're learning so much just in the alliance with, a dozen-ish people in the advisory and leadership team, and then a few dozen more among the working groups, and then, some hundreds more members who kind of tune in once in a while but don't have a specific project, but really trying to listen from at the top, in the middle, and from the grassroots bottom all at the same time and see how we can amplify that conversation. And one of my goal, kind of sector goals, and whether it's you or I think the top candidates for to have this happen would be you, Nicole Smith, and maybe me, but probably you or Nicole, is one of us doing a TED talk that goes mainstream. That's really
Yeah.
my goal, and that's been on the list for a few years of how can I or empower and help some anybody else, like who can get to that rank, because there's a lot of TEDx which is kind of more local, but
Yeah.
who among us worldwide, and it might be someone that I haven't even thought of, from Brazil or something that we haven't met yet, but
Dan
who.
Pallotta, have you heard his two TED Talks? So
Not
he
yet.
he has an amazing TED Talk called "The Way We Think About Charity Is Dead Wrong," and
Ah.
he is talking more about like fundraising,
Mhm.
advertising. But I mean, as someone with that much experience in the not-for-profit and charitable sector, oh my God, like I mean, his is one of the most viewed TED Talks ever. But maybe pitching to him a third
Mhm.
TED Talk focusing on our profession. But you just reminded me of something as well, which is that um, I think that the other thing that this pandemic is doing is just, it's like allowing a lot of that work that sits on the side of our desk, those projects that we want to get to, we're, for some of us, we are getting to those projects, right? And so the idea of, launching a new web series, or launching a
Mhm.
podcast, or I'm seeing people that have the time to read like the volunteer engagement literature that they've always been wanting to read, and that's exciting. Like that's a silver lining for me that I'm seeing from the pandemic as well. The other thing that I'm also seeing in Canada, but not necessarily in other countries, is there are a lot of like our colleagues, our leaders of volunteer colleagues that are being laid off or losing their jobs, but I'm also seeing a lot of them get new employment and really quickly.
Mhm.
And so, that indicates to me that on some level that there are executive directors and CEOs, and there is funding available in those organizations that where staff are funded by government. And, our government funding in Canada and the US is so different,
Very different. Very different.
very
Yeah.
different, right?
Very
And
different.
so
Yeah.
I am seeing a lot of colleagues secure new job opportunities, and it's really exciting to see that happen. um, One of the other things that's happened in Canada is that our government is really trying to fill the gap. And so there are wage subsidies for employees. So currently in my position at the YMCA, my position is being funded through a wage subsidy. It's not infinite, like currently ends in December. It has
Mhm.
been extended a couple times. So for me, my job is not as secure as I would like it to be. But I am seeing a lot of people in our field do still have their jobs. They aren't necessarily doing the job that they were doing pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
Many of us still can't have all of our volunteers back into our spaces because social distancing doesn't allow, doesn't make that possible, and people's own personal comfort level.
Mhm.
Some of our volunteers are not comfortable. They're not ready to come back. A lot of our volunteers are of an age where they are, in terms of their own health, they want to stay home, and that's what makes them feel safe. And then the thing about Canada is we have a ton of multi-generational families. And
Mhm.
so we have a lot of young volunteers that have a grandparent in the home. And so, they don't want to go volunteer somewhere and, potentially contract the coronavirus and then bring it home, or they have an elderly parent or an immunocompromised family member. So,
Mhm.
even though, some doors are opening up and we can welcome volunteers back, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's ready. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the smartest thing to do. And what I've noticed is that that's where the informal volunteering is picking up, right? And so
Right.
we see neighborhood groups coming together, and we see them, coming together to get groceries or to do food banks, pop-up food banks and things like that, which I think is wonderful in a pinch, and which I think is wonderful in this time. But what doesn't happen when that informal volunteering happens is none of those statistics around who's using that food and who needs that help is getting reported to our government. And so our government has no idea about all of these things that are happening, and they can't use that data to inform policy moving forward. Um, so that's, as much as I'm so in awe of community development folks and community organizers who are getting these things done, because they are able to galvanize huge numbers of our communities, to get this work done. And I'm even thinking about, in terms of like what's happening right now in terms of anti-racism, and getting tens and thousands of people to march in the street at the same time. That's amazing. I want to know how they do that. But at the same time, there's some data that's not being collected. There's information that our government funders are not getting.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see that connection being made. And unfortunately, I think in times of crisis, that just doesn't happen, right? You just move and you just get stuff done. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure where we'll end up on the other side of this pandemic. I do think that we will end up with a lot more people who are civically engaged,
Mm-hmm.
and where someone like me can hopefully attract someone like that to my organization to volunteer, with that same spirit and with that same energy and enthusiasm and network and connections as well.
Absolutely. And it's like you said, it's a loss of data and a loss of knowledge as
Yeah.
it's happening. That's so crucial. And it's really crucial to have that data. And that does not at all mean that any mutual aid or spontaneous or informal or grassroots element has to be absorbed by a nonprofit entity. It doesn't mean that it follows a certain evolution life path to become a nonprofit or some other kind of entity later on. And one of the examples that we're getting in the States is, we do not have any of the programs or social safety nets that Canada or Scandinavia or much of Europe has. And when
Yeah.
you don't grow up with it, you don't realize that you're missing it until a crisis like this
Yeah.
hits. And the people who, the nonprofits or government agencies that are doing any sort of social safety net of food security, shelter, clean water, open space for recreation, YMCA type
Yep.
programs, that kind of stuff. That suddenly has so many more clients and so much more need at the same time that we uh, either decisions too far high up the food chain, not connected to the volunteer administrator or leader of volunteers, are making
Yep.
decisions to let the volunteers go and making a really bad short-sighted decision, or like you spoke to before, as I'm seeing with a lot of friends and colleagues and clients, that people just, their personal safety and the safety and health of their family is more important than doing that particular shift at the food bank right now. But
Right now.
you
Yeah.
know on my block, I live on a little cul-de-sac, there's plenty of like checking on each other, checking on our neighbors. It's safe for me to go get groceries and do a contactless drop off. And we've had the fortune in San Francisco that the city of San Francisco and Shanti, which is already kind of a meals and elder care services and chronically ill services, have combined to absorb some of the informal stuff. But nature doesn't want something to go unsolved. And so if there's hunger and a lack of shelter and all these, and relocations from wildfires in California, all of these things are kind of happening at once. And so we now have many more millions in our population who need basic necessities to live that are only being met by community networks, by mutual aid. And I think that's going to change the way the sector is forever. I
Yep.
think it's really empowering to see that someone has created a wonderful peace march in social justice and anti-racist, anti-fascism march with thousands of people, and there's food and water there,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
not from,
Medics and
and there's medics,
yeah.
and there's legal aid,
Yeah.
and I think, and I'm also
You don't have
witnessing.
to sign a waiver to participate. You don't have to
Yeah,
do an interview and 3 reference checks. You can just show up about something that you're passionate about, right?
They don't, yeah, exactly. They don't have to call, like you said, three references. You don't have to show your
Yeah,
driver's license. It's just like, I can help cook. I've washed my hands. Here we go.
yeah, yeah,
Here's a mask. And everyone is doing much better food hygiene and COVID safety than I see when I do go to a supermarket on the
it's
corner.
true.
And
Yeah,
I'm the only one masked up walking my dog in my park in a city that is usually pretty good at this stuff. So
yeah,
it's really, I think, our opportunity right now as leaders of volunteers who are more formal or deeper into our careers, like you and I are into our decades. Let's let's not try to fit these people into our molds, but let's go and listen to them and hear what they have to say and learn from them and say, how can we help capture this data so that not just we can recreate these models of success elsewhere, again,
yeah,
whether they're formal or informal, but so that we can, in whatever avenues we have in our agencies, or if we are working with government agencies or consulting or what have you, uh, get this information where it can go to help positively impact policy and funding. Like
yeah.
how to, like, to me, that's our wonderful question right now, is how can we get that all on the same page and kind of grooving together in a way that doesn't feel like, um, the pros are stepping in and this is how you engage volunteers. Like, no, you're doing fine. I want to learn from you. You're doing
Yeah,
great. What's
yeah.
your secret?
And we also have different purposes, right? And
Right.
so
Yeah.
when you're like at the Y, for example, when we are recruiting volunteers and they're going to be in a setting with young children,
Mhm.
that can't be anyone who just puts their hand up,
Right.
right? We have to think about the safety of kids. So there's room for everybody to care about their community and contribute. Absolutely, yeah.
What are some of the ways that, since, YMCA is a very hands-on, in-person
Yeah.
kind of volunteering place with kids and elders and doing physical activity where you're breathing a lot, or
Yeah.
swimming in a big bunch of water, how have you adapted to online or remote or virtual things? Like, what are some practical examples of how that's worked at the Y in Toronto?
Well, the team at the Y that I work with is incredibly talented and incredibly innovative. And I was so impressed with how quickly, collectively across the Y, we were able to put together some online offerings. So right away, I mean, the YMCA of Greater Toronto is the largest YMCA in the world.
Wow.
We have over 400 locations. We do childcare, before and after school care, outdoor camps, day camps, overnight camps, outdoor education, employment, newcomer services, health and fitness, which is what the Y is best known for, the gym and swim. So we do a lot. And so for our employment and community and newcomer immigrant services staff, they were funded and they were able to really quickly pivot online.
Hmm.
And so they've been offering everything online. And they just recently have opened up their centers, and the stuff that has to happen one-on-one, they're doing that one-on-one. And otherwise, there's a lot of stuff that's going on online, because that's also where people seem to feel safe right now,
Right.
meeting. With our health and fitness centers, almost immediately we started offering, through our Facebook Live, we started offering classes. And I think at some point we were up to like 10 classes a day, and we had like this loyal following. And so um, now that our health and fitness centers are now reopened, we still offer both. So you can still, we have an app. So instead of doing everything on Facebook Live, there's an app for our members. You can go to the gym and work out, or you can, do some of our live classes through our app, which is amazing, which is not something that we had done before, because all of our teaching and all of our getting together for health and fitness was happening in our centers.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing that happened was all of our childcare centers closed for a long time. I think it was 3 to 4 months that our childcare centers closed. And so our childcare staff started doing things online as well on our Facebook Live. So they did like circle time in the morning. They did different crafts and story times. I got to actually do one of the story times and read my children's book. And it was
Yay.
so fun. It was so fun to connect with families, other parents, and kids in that way. And then our camp staff were doing really cool like science experiments and camp activities and camp games online. And so, you know, our center of community went from bricks and mortar to this
Hmm.
like virtual world, and we saw a lot of interest, and we saw a lot of people joining us, and we, you know, kind of built this consistent following. um, and now everything's kind of back open again, and so it looks different obviously when you drop your kid off at a childcare center. You know, you're not going up to the classroom with them. There's a, you know, a specific area where parents can't go past.
Hmm.
um, so, you know, obviously the way you work out looks different. You have to book an appointment in advance versus just showing up. But when it comes to volunteers, it's also really different because, you know, we have to be really careful about how many people are in the building. We could fill the building with volunteers, but then they would have, you know, nobody to support.
Right.
So we have to be really careful about that. So we've been really intentional and strategic about which volunteers we're inviting back, and sort of doing that in a staged approach. In our childcare centers, we're also having to be really strategic as well. For a time, the government actually forbade us from having any volunteers or students in our childcare centers. We're now able to have students come back. So students who are training to be early childhood educators can come back and volunteer with us. But the great thing is that we've had a lot of volunteers really interested in virtually volunteering. So through mentorship, through support, running workshops, doing tutoring, even upgrading their own skills and getting their own continuing education credits for some of our volunteer positions that require that. Or doing training. We did some amazing training on the dimensions of diversity that a large group of our volunteers took as well. So it's a different world for now. And I think that when we come out of this pandemic, I'm really hoping that there'll be a hybrid of both. And what this pandemic will have taught us is that not everything, not all community needs to be served in person,
Hmm.
and that there is this online community, and that there is this appetite for people to access the service that they need without having to take public transportation and spend that money, you know, to go to a workshop in person if they can do it online, right? Um, so I like that. Like, again, it's another silver lining from this pandemic, is that it's really pushed us to pivot, that word, um,
The
to
P word, as we've been using
keyword,
so
yeah,
much in the last few months. Pivot, everyone
pivot.
pivot.
But it's really been more about innovating, right?
Right.
And not thinking of the risks so much in the way that we're used to thinking about them, right? So I think post pandemic, you know, even though virtual volunteering has been around for so long,
Yeah.
it's definitely in my experience seen a boom.
Hmm.
But it's also getting me thinking about, like, what are other opportunities that we could have for volunteers that are virtual, that we just weren't thinking about because we were so focused on that in-person experience.
And I love the innovation that's coming out of it, and just the chance for this reset. You know, some people are calling this time the great pause, but
Yeah,
it's not a pause so much as I think it's just it's a reset. Like the planet kind of needs a reset, societies need a reset. This is a great time to rethink and to listen to and follow where the innovation goes, where
yeah,
it's creating a positive change. And absolutely, to the earlier point that you mentioned, that there's more people, it lowers a barrier of access,
yeah,
um, by cost, by time, by travel, by ability. There may be ways that someone can interact in an online conference that would have been more difficult if they, you know, are in the deaf community and they turned up and there isn't an ASL interpreter, or there isn't, you know, a live caption, or there isn't a broadcast text, voice to text. So few conferences have those accessibility features, but
yeah,
um, I know you and I both were at the Points of Light online conference this year, and they got, you know, thousands more people than would have been able to turn up in person. So there's that kind of access.
yeah,
And speaking of being innovative and ahead of the curve in hybrid conferences, you, yay, are hosting the Better Impact Alive VMPC hybrid conference in October, late
yeah.
October, on risk management, hard risk, soft risk. invisible risks, very
It
obvious risks
Yes.
that you haven't thought of yet. and
Yeah.
and this is something that and that I posted in years past when we were allowed to leave America and fly to places,
Oh,
which
right.
isn't a thing anymore. And it's always been ahead in technology. And Tony Goodrow, founder of Better Impact, they're so great at being at the cutting edge of tech, but really leading the way, I think, in uh, the last 4 or 5 years of having an online conference that mixes an in-person experience. And this year, it's really adapted because I talk a lot to our co-chair Gretchen because we work together in live and things. It's
Yeah.
really adapted to you can pretty much sign in from anywhere and still have a little breakout room and some discussions and have that in-person benefit of
Yep.
your local Dovey or AVA or group of colleagues that you want to work with. So tell me more about how that's going. How is the prep for that? How is it exciting? Are you learning more? Are you doing more? What's happening with that?
Yeah, it is exciting. So it's taking place October 20th and 21st. And, depending on the time zone you're in, you would pick one day or the other. Um, Four amazing speakers. So Jennifer Bennett, who is a CVA, also in California, close to you, from Volunteer Match, who's going to be talking about, what is she talking about?
I
I
think
think
she
she's
has the soft risk
soft risk, right? So
angle, I
yeah.
believe. Yeah. Yeah.
And anyways, I just love talking to her and learning from her. So I'm
Mhm.
really excited that she's going to be there. So from the West Coast, the American West Coast, and then from the Canadian West Coast is Lindsey Baker, another CVA, who is the manager of volunteers at Oceanwise Conservation Association. And she's going to be talking about like she's going to be talking about like just taking risks, so
Mhm.
pilot programs and things like that. And she also has this amazing coaching background,
Mhm.
so she's going to be talking also a little bit about, I think, like the psychology around taking risks, if using her coaching background. And then we have Lori Gottlieb, who is an instructor of the volunteer management program at Humber College, and she's also a consultant in our field, has done a lot of great work in various charities and not-for-profits in Canada, who is going to be doing a session about I think it's like assessing your the program that you
Mm.
have currently, and doing like a checkup on it. So taking you through things to think about at different stages. And then the last speaker is someone new to me, Sarah Olivieri,
Mm.
who's out of New York, who's also a consultant, not in our field, but has a ton of experience working with charities and not-for-profits. And she's also going to be, with her lens, just talking about risk from her lens as well, and sort of how she supports her clients through thinking about those things. So I think the fact that we have this conversation, that we're having this conference about risk, we planned that and chose that,
Yeah,
right?
like a year ago. Yeah. More
Can
than
you
a year
imagine
ago.
that was 11 months ago we were in Niagara Falls? I was thinking
I
about that.
know. We were walking around and like eating in a restaurant,
Yeah.
looking at stuff, posing for pictures together. And
Animatronic dinosaurs, do you remember that?
yes, giant dinosaurs. Well, I'll put links to the Facebook pictures that are public on Facebook, and how the world has changed, and just that
Yeah.
I mean, it's always a good topic, but I think you're getting more engagement than ever this year because that's what we have to think about these days,
Yep.
and thinking
Yeah.
about it in a new way. And for Sarah out of New York, I know again, more and more we have to understand that we can't just talk to each other in our sector. That's great. There's certain learning that comes out, but what is the person from the outside? What does an HR or a lawyer or a risk assessment person from the bigger picture have to teach us? So I'm really excited. Normally, if I were watching and not watching from in person in Canada, but watching from here, I would actually pop down to my friend Brian's Peninsula Humane Society and watch in person. But I get to dial in from the same awesome music room and
Yeah.
participate. But I think we're getting a little California cohort that we are sort of near each other, but we don't have to all travel and do it. We can sit here in our pajamas. And I know there's the Australian that Tracy and Ange in Australia are having like a pajama party
That's
broadcast
awesome.
version, and they've been wanting to do that for years, and now it's like, this is the time to deepen those connections
Yep.
across the globe with each other. So I'm really excited. It's super fun to be there and host, and I'm just so delighted that you get to do that this year,
And
and
I got to
perhaps in
watch
coming
you
ones.
and I got to watch you do it last year, so I feel like really set up for success because I had this great example of watching you do it, and the way you prepped all of the speakers as well. I was able to use some of your advice and guidance on one of our prep calls as well. So, for anyone who is looking for a conference experience in the
Mhm.
midst of the pandemic, it's not going to be a hotel with free pens and pads of paper and water,
And
but
lanyards,
and
so many
lanyards.
lanyards.
But it's going to be an incredible experience. The price is amazing for an individual. Check the it's the Better Impact website. So check to see if there is an AVA or Dovia or a local organization hosting close to you. You can join with one of them if you want to be, around people that you know. I know Dana, I think, in LA and Sacramento. I think that they
Major
are.
Dovias, yeah.
They're
Sacramento's got a big one. Dovia LA, you've presented for them. I presented for them.
uh,
Megan Maloney and that crew down there are amazing. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. So, if you're interested, think about it. And it's going to be incredible because the four speakers that we have, like their diversity of their experiences and the topics are going to be great. And it's not a COVID conference, but I
Yep.
know that some of the things that we're dealing with around COVID are obviously going to pop up. And so I think that the material is going to be really relevant, especially for right now. Yeah.
I think it's really relevant, and I think it's evergreen. And the beauty about this is if you do register for it, then you've got some access to the material later on
Yeah.
as well. And it is, it's a cool club, so you should join it. And it's a
Yeah.
reasonable price. I'll put the links. The timing of our Priceless advice interview of this talk. I'll be able to get this out probably 2-3 weeks before that conference, so end of September, early October,
Awesome.
which will seem like we're time traveling when people watch the video of me saying the dates that they're watching this, but that's always fun. That's a fun
Yeah.
thing to do. And I know that the signups are going really well. Again, it's for what people pay for in-person or online conferences. It's quite reasonable
Yeah.
to join this, and very well worth it because it is a number of experts and that discussion that's all day, and ways to really practical ways to bring that into whatever your practice is as a leader or volunteer, and whatever challenges you're with. I think it's an evergreen topic. I know we've been talking about this topic, and Tony's and Gretchen and other producers behind the scenes of like, well, if we, this is just something that we really need to get to. And I'm glad, again, just wonderful psychic clairvoyant, slightly clairvoyant vibes that 2020 is definitely the year for this topic to happen. And I'm excited for you. And if you want me to send you a really funny print blazer to wear, I'm happy to clean it very well, put gloves on, put a mask on, send it in the mail. But your style is so elegant and wonderful, and everyone will be wearing, I can guarantee, a full outfit and pants and shoes,
Issues. Yeah. I
the
was gonna say,
whole thing, whole ensemble.
it's also, it just kind of popped up to me because you and I we are so extroverted. But one of the things I also love about all of the online training that's happening is that it appeals to extroverts and introverts. So if you are introverted, nobody can see if you want to shut off your camera, or if you just want to, like, take in the learning the way that works for you. um, you know and if you're extroverted, people are being really creative with polls and using things like Kahoot and Mentimeter and Slack and the chat box and all different ways to get people to interact. So I think that's another thing that I'm finding, is that, like, people who don't usually speak up or who I don't usually notice, because they're quieter and they learn differently and they don't necessarily say much in workshops, I feel like I'm hearing and I'm seeing them more and more. And so the hybrid conference is perfect for that, because you will be able to just sort of sit and take in information. And then if you choose to participate in the breakout rooms and the group learning, you have the opportunity to do that as well. So I feel like it caters to all types of learning at this point.
And that's important too. And that's, an advantage as well, that again, that accessibility, that other than the digital divide, which certain other nonprofits or programs are trying to solve in getting people better internet connections or tablets or ways to work. Um, but if someone is plugged in to the internet and using computers, this is so adaptable to different neurodiversities and, like you said, traditional learning styles, non-traditional learning styles, asymmetric, whether you're participating in the moment or you need more time to absorb it later. You're a wonderful person to learn from, and I'm so grateful that we've taken the time to catch up, not just as priceless advice and to share with our colleagues, and to get this information out there in the interview and in your wonderful Tuesday tips, and just, to get caught up as friends and like, hey, how is it going zooming with
Absolutely.
kids and puppies and offices and wardrobes, lions, witches, and wardrobes in the background, and all of that good stuff. So I really I love and respect and value you, Faiza, and everything that you're doing in the world. And I'm so glad that we're connected to each other in whatever technological ways, until such time as we can have coffee and hugs in person
Yes.
again.
Love you too, Dana. And I really, as I said, the extrovert in me thanks the extrovert in you. Thank you for this experience. Thank you for this YouTube series that you're putting out there and really living your CVA essay of you are not alone. Like, you are really somebody that I think about. You really care about this profession, and you care about supporting those of us who choose to do this work for however long we choose to do this work. And I really, really appreciate you. You're one of a kind, Dana.
Thank you, Faiza. Ah, the love fest that is our conversations. Much appreciated. Best to you and yours, and we'll see you at the hybrid conference and at other conversations. And I'll put some links, not just to how to get signed up for the upcoming Better Impact Hybrid Conference Risk Management, and any other talks or webinars that you send me to have, and also your book. Let's promote the book
Oh,
too.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's bornonafriday.com, and the book is called My Mama Wants to Eat Me Up. It's a great gift for like
Yay!
new parents and new babies. Yeah.
Yay! I love it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you
Right.
so much, Faiza, and stay happy, healthy, well up in the northern lands.